Anavar is a very well-known anabolic steroid, not just in bodybuilding, but also in other sports. It's especially popular among beginners trying to use anabolic androgenic steroids for the first time. Also, Anavar is the most commonly used anabolic androgenic steroid among women, as it is considered the safest anabolic androgenic steroid out there. Some people love Anavar while others don't like it at all, and they see it as a waste of money. In this video, I will explain everything about Anavar, its history, medical uses, and properties like its half-life. We will also cover how it is used in sports and bodybuilding, and we'll take a look on its dosages, benefits, and side effects. And we will also talk about Anavar-only cycles and whether it's a good or bad idea. And should Anavar be used during cutting phases only, or it can be used in bulking phases also? So, if you are an athlete or a bodybuilder, male or female, or just curious about Anavar, this video will cover everything you need to know about it. And now, let's get started with the history and medical usage of Anavar. Anavar is the brand name, while the chemical or generic name is Oxandrolone. Oxandrolone was first described in 1962. It was initially produced by the pharmaceutical company Serum, which is now Pfizer. It was sold under the trade name Anavar in the US and Netherlands. Later, it was marketed in other countries like Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Spain, and France under different trade names. Anavar was designed to be an oral anabolic steroid that is as safe as possible. It was created especially for women and children for medical purposes, and it proved to be effective for medical applications with minimal side effects, not only for men, but also for women and children. In its early years, Anavar was used for different medical purposes. This included rebuilding muscle mass lost during surgeries, accidents, or chronic infections. It was also used to treat osteoporosis and burn injuries. In 1989, its production was discontinued due to declining sales and concerns about misuse by athletes. However, it returned to the market 6 years later after being approved by the FDA for treating AIDS, hepatitis, and late growth in children. Today, Oxandrolone continues to be produced by pharmaceutical companies for medical purposes. It is also available in generic versions. And of course, it is still produced by illegal underground labs. And now, let's move to the structure and characteristics of Anavar. Anavar, also known as Oxandrolone, is derived from the hormone dihydrotestosterone, or DHT. It is classified as a C17 alpha-alkylated anabolic steroid. This means its chemical structure was modified by adding a methyl group to protect the hormone during oral administration. Without this modification, its effect would be greatly reduced when taken in oral form. However, this same modification also puts stress on the liver. The half-life of Anavar is only 9 hours. This means it must be taken frequently to maintain consistent hormone levels in the blood. However, some people use oral steroids like Anavar only on training days as a pre-workout booster. Also, it can be seen as a harm reduction strategy to allow the use of oral steroids for longer periods, but opinions vary on this practice. We may cover this topic in depth in another video. The anabolic androgenic ratio of Anavar is 24 to 322. I will explain this in a second. The androgenic properties simply are the effects related to male characteristics. Things like deepening of the voice, increased body and facial hair, oily skin and acne, or aggression. But the anabolic properties are the effects that support growth and repair of tissues, like muscles and bones. Things like increasing muscle mass by promoting protein synthesis, improving bone density, and helping the body recover faster from workouts or injuries. All anabolic androgenic steroids have both androgenic and anabolic properties, but the ratio varies with each compound. This ratio is always compared to testosterone, which has a ratio of 100 to 100. This is why scientists created anabolic steroids, to increase the anabolic effects and reduce the androgenic effects to minimize side effects. So, on paper, Anavar is 3 to 6 times more anabolic than testosterone and has minimal androgenic effects. However, in the real world, testosterone is a much better muscle building compound. This is why I consider the anabolic androgenic ratio to be just a guideline, not something that can be applied on 100% in the real world scenarios. Many other factors determine a steroid's strength and effect in the body, not just the anabolic androgenic ratio. And now, let's discuss why do athletes in different sports use Anavar. Anavar is used by athletes across many sports, not just bodybuilding. It is popular in speed sports and martial arts because Anavar builds pure muscle tissue without fat or water retention, which is important for athletes who rely on speed in their sports and those who need to stay in a certain weight class like MMA fighters or boxers. Let's move to the next point, which is Anavar usage in bodybuilding. The common usage of Anavar among bodybuilders is during contest prep or cutting cycles because it builds high-quality muscle without water retention. But don't think it is a fat burner. You can just take Anavar and eat whatever you want and expect to get lean. Fat loss comes from your diet and cardio. You must be in a caloric deficit to burn fat. Of course, Anavar not only helps build muscle, but also increases strength. This is why it's also popular among powerlifters. Some even use it during bulking phases to add lean muscle or as a pre-workout booster to increase strength. Also, Anavar is well known for its pumps during the workouts, but in general, it is a mild drug and you shouldn't expect incredible results from using Anavar only. Before we move to the next point, if you found value in this video, please give it a like. And now, let's move to the side effects of Anavar. Anavar is considered one of the safest anabolic steroids and is very well tolerated by most users. Personally, I have never seen a male experience androgenic side effects while using Anavar. Also, users report feeling good and a sense of well-being when using it at moderate dosages, as its side effects are pretty mild. This is why it is the most commonly used anabolic steroid among women. However, the risk of virilization symptoms like deepening of the voice cannot be completely excluded, especially at high dosages and prolonged usage. Anavar is 5-alpha reduced, which means it doesn't convert into DHT. So if you are experiencing hair loss while using Anavar, taking something like finasteride won't help. But of course, Anavar is much milder compared to other anabolic androgenic steroids, and this will likely not happen. For estrogen-related side effects, Anavar doesn't pose any risk as it doesn't convert into estrogen. So, there is no concern about gyno or water retention. Now, let's talk about Anavar's impact on the liver. As we mentioned before, Anavar is a C17-alpha alkylated compound. This chemical structure protects the hormone from being deactivated by the liver during oral administration. However, this process puts strain on the liver. Interestingly, research has shown that Anavar is considered less harmful to the liver compared to other oral steroids. Even all of them have the same chemical structure modification. In general, all oral steroids, including Anavar, are well known for reducing appetite. This makes oral steroids less ideal for bulking cycles, where the calories that should be consumed are pretty high. And now, let's talk about its cardiovascular side effects. All anabolic androgenic steroids, especially orals like Anavar, are harsher on the lipids, more than the injectable anabolic androgenic steroids. They tend to decrease HDL, which is known as the good cholesterol, and increase LDL, which is known as the bad cholesterol. Surprisingly, even though Anavar is considered to be a mild compound, research has shown it raises LDL more than other oral steroids. So, high dosages and prolonged use of oral steroids can increase the risk of cardiovascular diseases in a significant way. Also, all anabolic androgenic steroids, including Anavar, can raise blood pressure. So, it is essential to monitor your blood pressure on a regular basis. And now, let's talk about the controversial topic, which is the side effects of Anavar on testosterone suppression and Anavar-only cycles. All anabolic androgenic steroids, when taken at dosages for muscle building and strength gains, will suppress natural testosterone production. This happens because they disrupt the HPTA axis. Of course, some anabolic androgenic steroids are more suppressive than others. For example, Nandrolone and Trenbolone can cause a quick shutdown of natural testosterone production even at low dosages, and recovering natural testosterone levels after using them can take a long time. On the other hand, using Anavar for short periods may not completely shut down testosterone production from the beginning, but it will 100% suppress it in some extent, and using it for a longer period will cause more and more suppression. There was a 12-week study on HIV males. They were divided into 3 groups. The first group took 20 mg per day. The second group took 40 mg per day. And the third group took 80 mg per day. The first and the second group experienced about 45% reduction in serum testosterone levels, while the third group experienced 66% reduction. So that shows us that Anavar-only cycles will likely not be a good idea, which is very popular among people who are starting to use anabolic steroids for the first time, as beginners find it more easy and more convenient to take oral steroids instead of injecting. In my opinion, Anavar-only cycle doesn't make sense. This is because Anavar will suppress your natural testosterone production to a degree, as we have seen in the previous study. And testosterone is the primary hormone that your body relies on for proper function. Its suppression will affect other hormones like estrogen and DHT production. These hormones are very important for the body to function properly, and also they play a big role in the muscle building process. By suppressing your natural testosterone production, which will happen anyway, even it takes longer with Anavar, you will experience lower levels of estrogen. And as a result, you won't get the most out of your cycle, and you will get low estrogen side effects. Therefore, testosterone should always be the base for any cycle. If someone tries to avoid injection administration and relies only on oral steroids, it is better to avoid taking the route of using anabolic androgenic steroids completely from the beginning. It is most likely that the recovery for your natural testosterone production should return after using Anavar and taking post-cycle therapy or PCT, but it may also return without PCT. It could just take much longer. So, taking a PCT, in my opinion, is the better option. Instead of rolling the dice and see if natural testosterone production comes back on its own. In case if you plan to use anabolic androgenic steroid long-term anyway, in my opinion, going back to TRT is the better option, as you will anyway depend on TRT after years of cycling on and off. And now, let's talk about the dosages of Anavar for medical conditions and how it is commonly used among athletes. For both men and women, the original prescribing guidelines were quite similar, 2.5 mg to 20 mg daily, with 5 to 10 milligrams being the most common dose, typically taken for 2 to 4 weeks, and sometimes it was used for up to 3 months. Among male bodybuilders, the starting dose of Anavar is usually about 30 milligrams per day, and the most common dosage is 50 milligrams per day, and it can go as high as 100 milligrams per day, taken for 6 to 8 weeks. For women, the most common dose is 5 to 10 milligrams per day, sometimes more. Maybe some take higher dosages, but here we are only talking about the average and most common usage. And as I always say, the higher the dose, the greater the side effects. But increasing the dose doesn't always lead to better results. There is always a point of diminishing returns. That is when you experience more side effects without gaining any extra benefits. In my opinion, I find Anavar should be used in cutting cycles rather than bulking phases, and preferably for a limited time, as it will stress the liver, and orals in general will affect appetite, which is not ideal when you need to consume high calories. It also has a great impact on cholesterol levels, and using it for a long periods puts you at a higher risk of cardiovascular disease. Let's move now to the last point, which is availability and supply of Anavar. Anavar is still produced by some pharmaceutical companies. The most famous brand is Oxandrolone in the US, and of course it is produced by underground labs. It is usually available in 10 milligrams or less, sometimes 5 milligrams or 2.5 milligrams. You will find it under different brand names in the market, such as Oxanabol, Oxavar, or Oxanabolic. These are just brand names, but the compound itself remains the same, Oxandrolone. And here is a very important point to keep in mind, especially for women. The price of the raw material of Anavar is pretty high, which is why it is commonly faked or underdosed. You might end up getting something else like winstrol instead of Anavar, and that increases your risk of experiencing virilization symptoms. So it's crucial to ensure you are getting a genuine product. Also, considering Anavar's price and how often it is faked or underdosed, you will find that many bodybuilders don't like Anavar and prefer something like winstrol instead, as it is a stronger and cheaper compound. I have made a detailed video about it, so click on this video to learn more about winstrol.